So my last speaker this morning is Fahd Batayneh. He's with ICANN and wants to talk to us about their strategy working group and how this is a community-driven approach to the.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, everybody. So my colleagues were presenting about various technologies related to research and educational networks. It was really interesting. It's my first time here attending such an event, and the experience has been overwhelming. My presentation today is going to be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's all related to the internet. So my colleagues were talking about using the internet for research and educational networks. ICANN is a body that is involved with the naming and numbering aspects of the internet. So my name is Fahd Batayneh. I work for ICANN as a stakeholder engagement coordinator. I cover the Middle East. And a little bit about ICANN. So ICANN stands for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. We have hub offices in Los Angeles, in Istanbul, and in Singapore. Jonathan was talking about moving from NRENs to GRENs. And so that's something similar to what ICANN does, in that rather than being connected to a certain country or a jurisdiction, it's a global entity that covers the entire world, that has operations on various time zones around the world to better the internet around the world. We, of course, have engagement centers in Beijing, in Brussels, in Geneva, in Montevideo, and in Washington, D.C. for various reasons. For example, Brussels is where the EU and EC are headquartered. Washington, D.C. is the political hub for the United States, etc., etc. In much the same way, Tunis has an annual meeting, and that is open for everybody interested to attend the events. We at ICANN have 3 annual meetings, and the attendance is open to anybody who would like to attend. Of course, ICANN is represented by various stakeholders. So we have stakeholders from the public sector, from the private sector, civil society, and the technical community and academia, you folks. So you definitely have a place in the ICANN process. Our upcoming ICANN meeting is going to take place in Singapore during the last week of March. And so if you are interested to attend the event or probably know more about ICANN, you can go to our website at icann.org, and I'm sure you're going to find a lot of information there that is more or less related to what you do in your daily lives. So what does ICANN do? So when we talk about ICANN, we're talking about naming and numbering. In terms of names, we talk about domain names. So we saw Siena.org, we saw Terina.org, and all those other domain names. We have tatacommunications.com. So those are the naming conventions on the internet. ICANN also deals with IP addresses. So in order for communication to take place between devices across the internet, we need IP addresses to communicate. Of course, ICANN provides a lot of technical functions through the IANA operations. So the IANA is the Internet Assigned Numbering Authority. They administer the DNS root servers. So when we talk about the domain name system, we have a tier, in much the same way the internet has tier 1 connections, the domain name system also has, if you may say, a tier 1 where the root servers are the beginning point for the domain name system. Of course, another function that is done by IANA is to allocate IP addresses, whether version 4 or version 6. And that is done through regional internet registries. So IANA allocate IP addresses to regional internet registries, and regional internet registries allocate them to countries. Of course, across the world, there are 5 regional internet registries covering 5 different regions. So we have ASREN for North America, we have LACNIC for the Caribbean and South America, we have RIPE-NCC for Europe and West Asia, we have AFRINIC for Africa, and we have, of course, APNIC for, let's say, the APAC region. Of course, when my colleagues were talking about NRENs and expansion of NRENs and the usage of NRENs for enhancing the educational sector, they need IP addresses in order to expand their operations. And so one of the issues that the internet is facing at the moment is the exhaustion of the version 4 IP addressing scheme. And so the world is encouraged to move to IPv6. And that is where, I mean, this is a good example where collaboration between ICANN and the different internet organizations can collaborate with the academic sector in order to push this initiative forward. Now, in order for IPv6 to push off the ground and be better deployed around the world, we need capacity building. We have to aware people of how that is done, and we actually need test beds for that to happen. Some countries do have IPv6 deployed. For example, Switzerland uses around 12% of the communication on the internet in Switzerland uses IPv6. And so probably NRENs could be a good place where IPv6 can be deployed, and they could be a good example for, let's say, the regional community, or let's say the national community within a country to really push forward and start deploying IPv6. So ICANN is actually involved also, the main function of ICANN is to develop policies related to internet naming and numbering. Of course, policies are done in a bottom-up, consensus-driven, multi-stakeholder approach. So when we talk about bottom-up, it's actually the community or the various stakeholders who actually come together and say, okay, we need to develop a policy on this, or we need a new initiative such as that. And once they are in consensus that this is how the policy is going to look, it gets approved, and the internet community can start using them. When we talk about multi-stakeholders, we're talking, as I said earlier, we're talking about public sector, the private sector, civil society, and the technical and academic sector. So current projects and activities at ICANN. Probably some of you might have heard about the expansion of the naming space on the internet. So we have this new generic top-level domain name program. Hundreds of new names are going to be introduced as top-level domains. So many of us know .com, .net, .org, and many of us go to those domain names to register their domain names online. So we have new names such as .shop, .hotel, we also have some brand names such as .mcdonald's. We have city names such as .london, .dubai, etc. So we can see that these naming TLDs are more or less property on the internet, and we all can buy a piece of this property. Of course, this is not cheap. It could cost you around $250,000 just to submit the application, and another $250,000 to have the infrastructure in hand. It's quite expensive, but then this is an expansion on the internet. Another specific item within top-level domains is the use of internationalized domain names. So all of us use domain names in English, while there is in fact also domain names in native languages, such as in Arabic, in Chinese, in Cyrillic, in Hindi, in Urdu, and other different languages around the world. The goal behind having international domain names is to actually probably bring on board more people on the internet and make people feel more easy in using the internet in their native languages. We have a lot of capacity building initiatives to aware people of whether IPv6 or domain name security extensions, or even issues related to new GTLDs and IDNs. We believe at ICANN that capacity building is a key driver in awareing people of what's going on the internet and how to better use the internet to serve our lives and to serve our economies and to serve our countries. We have regional strategies within ICANN. We have 8 regional strategies covering 8 regions around the world. For the Middle East, we have a Middle East strategy. And so these strategies rely heavily on volunteers from within the community who live within the community and live in the region and understand the needs of the region. From there on, they developed regional strategies to better assist the internet community in the region to understand the expansions on the internet and what is needed and what are the opportunities that have been untapped, whether business opportunities or even educational opportunities, etc., etc. Shortly, I'll be talking about the Middle East strategy in a brief. Of course, ICANN also promotes, as I mentioned earlier, the deployment of IPv6 and DNSSEC. DNSSEC is actually a security extension. So when we talk about NRENs, security is a key component of our network. So we ensure that our NRENs are secure, stable, and resilient. And that's the same case for the domain name system. It should be secure, stable, and resilient. Of course, in order, we also deploy secondary root servers. The goal behind deploying secondary root servers is to actually, again, have a secure, a stable, and a resilient infrastructure around the world. I'm sure NRENs do the same thing. I mean, you connect your networks together in an attempt to actually better utilize these networks, and probably it becomes a good platform for exchanging information and so on. So what is ICANN doing for the Middle East strategy? As I said earlier, there's a Middle East strategy, and there's a working group that was formed in late 2012. It's coordinated by ICANN. It covers 22 Arab states, as well as Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. So that's the region I cover. It's an ad hoc working group that consists of 21 experts from 11 countries. It's a 3-year strategy, and the working group decided to come out with a 1-year implementation plan that gets revisited year after year, just to see how things looked for the past year and what are the priorities for the coming year. Another thing we are doing at ICANN is that we're having an Arab DNS forum. So frankly speaking, the DNS industry in the Arab region is quite weak, or let's say in the Middle East region. So statistics say that there are around 255 million domain names registered worldwide, and 1 million of those are registered in the region of the 25 countries I mentioned. So that's a ratio of 1 to 255. That's a very low ratio, and that's not the way forward. The e-commerce industry is quite weak in the Arab region, in this region. There are a lot of business opportunities in the domain name industry that people are not aware of in this region. And so we see that such a DNS forum could probably assist the region in understanding what's going on the internet, what are the expansions on the internet, and what are the various business opportunities found on the internet. So the strategic goals for ICANN's engagement in the region, we have 3 strategic goals. The first thing is to foster two-way engagement between ICANN and the broader internet community in the region. The region is very much underrepresented at ICANN, so the ICANN process in developing policies can have has volunteers from around the world. Anybody could join. You don't have to have a certain knowledge base or a skill set to actually join ICANN's process. If you are interested in developing internet policies, you can join in. Frankly speaking, the majority of who actually contribute to the ICANN process are the folks probably in North America, Western Europe, and to some extent in Asia. And so from the region, we have what we call the usual suspects. They are people who you can count using your hands. They are very limited in their numbers, and they are the usual faces who always appear at ICANN events. So we want to have more players from the region involved in the ICANN process. We would like to build a strong and competitive domain name industry in the region. I mean, as I said, 1 million registrations compared to 255 million registrations worldwide. We have barely any interests in the domain name industry, and we would like to change that. And we would like to also promote multi-stakeholder internet governance mechanisms in the region. So internet governance, some people call it the new religion. Internet governance is a forum where people discuss issues related to the internet. It doesn't have any binding results or outcomes. It's just that people discuss, share their thoughts, share their knowledge, and share their experiences as means to introduce communities and introduce people worldwide to what's going on the internet and how best to utilize this rich resource of information and business opportunities. So the strategic areas of work for ICANN is 3 things. The working group defined 3 strategic areas to work on for the region, and one is the DNS security and stability. The other is the domain name industry at large, and the third is internet governance ecosystem. Of course, the working group has a wiki space, and the URL is as I've shown on the presentation, on the slide. And so our future plans really, We are currently working on a couple of initiatives. The first initiative is a task force on Arabic internationalized domain names. So as I mentioned earlier, internationalized domain names are domain names in native languages rather than in English. Some countries have have utilized their internationalized domain names in a really interesting manner. For example, Russia have their .rf IDN. They have more than 800,000 registrations under it. Of course, Russians admire their language, and so having so many number of registrations under their IDN really shows that there is a lot of potential for internationalized domain names. China has around 400,000 registrations, and that's also an interesting fact. In the Arab region, probably Egypt has the most number of internationalized domain name registrations with like 3,000 plus registrations, and that's quite low. So this task force is going to deal with several issues in an attempt to promote the use of internationalized domain names. Of course, the working group, this task force was formed in October during the second Arab IGF that took place in Algeria, early October, of course. The working group consists of 20 experts who have different backgrounds, whether DNS or linguistic background or background related to Unicode. We have a dedicated wiki space, and the URL is shown on the slide. And it's, of course, open to newcomers who are still interested in joining. Now, one interesting fact about this task force is that it's led by an academic. So he's from Pakistan. So this gentleman actually joined the ICANN process back in 2008. He kind of managed to find where his interests are at ICANN. And he realized that working on Arabic internationalized domain names is a way forward. He works actually, at the moment, he works as a consultant for ICANN on issues related to Arabic internationalized domain names. So what I'm trying to say here is that even sometimes when you have to volunteer to do a work, to learn, and you spend part of your time actually learning and probably giving some of your time to contribute to the proceedings of the work, probably at the end of the day you can really find some business opportunities where you can make money from. So it's really, for ICANN, it's not just about getting people to volunteer for their work, but it's also a learning process where you learn, where you network with people, and at the end of the day you can probably have some good business opportunities to work on. We also have a task force on capacity building activities. The working group, the Middle East Strategy Working Group, is in consensus that building capacity in the region is the way forward to promote internet governance, to promote the domain name industry. Of course, this was just announced. We circulated a call for volunteers just 2 weeks ago, and this should be open until December the 21st. And whoever is interested in contributing to the proceedings of this task force is very much welcome to contact us. So the main areas of capacity building is related to the domain name industry business, registry and registrars, IPv6, internet governance, DNSSEC, public key infrastructure. So these are the main points the task force is targeting. And the third and final model that the Middle East Strategy Working Group is currently working on is the train the trainer model. This is really not an easy task. A lady just 2 days ago during the Chains Red workshop mentioned that they have been trying to promote open source software on NRENs, and they have a model where they are going to build capacity and then train the trainers and probably certify them so that probably in every country or every region around the world there are qualified trainers who can really assist in probably building new NRENs and having and building capacity for existing NRENs. At ICANN, in order for we are very much keen to educate people. We always need new faces, and so we have this platform called ICANN Learn, where people can, of course this is still in beta, but we envision this platform to be a source where people can learn about ICANN, where people who think that they would like to conduct capacity building programs and workshops can just post some content here in collaboration with ICANN, of course, and have a target audience who would be interested in doing these courses. So of course this platform will be provided to the community at no cost. It's just that ICANN would like to see people really using this platform to build capacity and push things forward. So that is my presentation for today. Probably it was a little bit different than what my colleagues presented earlier. John actually told me to talk about terabytes. It's all about gigabytes, and it's going to stay there. I have nothing to do with terabytes, really. And yeah, so that's ICANN. That's my email ID. If you really would like to ask me anything about ICANN or the ICANN process or the domain name industry, I'm available today evening, and you can always communicate with me via email. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So do we have time for a few questions, or? We have to, yes, I agree. Okay, so I would like to open it up to the floor for questions. You've heard a wide range of thoughts here, so. All right. Any questions? Yeah.
All the challenges that we have, there must be some research that is going on to improve the efficiency of the internet protocol. IP has been around for a long time, and the upper layers, of course, to transfer more efficiently the huge amounts of data that are being generated. I wonder if any of the panelists has any information about breaking research for more efficiency in the software layer, at the upper layer of the stack, or at any layer, as a matter of fact. I know you're talking about physical connectivity, but really transferring things with a lot more efficient ways.
One of the slides that both Yves Pop and I put up showed this North Atlantic 100 gig connection. So for us, it was an interesting experiment to commandeer the fiber and to commandeer the equipment to achieve 100 gig. But the purpose of this link is to explore applications that can actually consume 100 gig. What service providers do around the world is they aggregate all these new users, you know, millions of smartphones and millions of computers, and so they aggregate all these up, and they need a lot of bandwidth in order to do that. However, in the research community, there are a very few number of what are often referred to as elephant flows that require and can consume these very large amounts of bandwidth with a single app. Some of the work that's being done over those 100 gig links is to explore new protocol methods. TCP doesn't scale particularly well at these speeds. UDP is another protocol that scales a little bit better but is less time tolerant. What are the protocols that we can invent that work over highly reliable fibers and do much more efficient file transfers? So a lot of it revolves around evolution of protocols, and some of it revolves around new applications. So there are, you know, a handful of apps that can consume that amount of bandwidth right now. What are the next generation of applications? And the purpose of this North Atlantic link is to try and tease out some of those new applications or new protocols that can improve the efficiency that you're asking about.
Let me expand just a little bit, if you don't mind. Maybe expand the question. We, at one time, you know, there's been a lot of talk about fiber switching at the chip layer. That's one issue. The other issue is, for example, we're talking about latency. Latency, that could probably be reduced with changes to the protocols. And I'm not a technical enough person to talk about this, but latency is a big issue. And I'm sure even applications that cannot fill the pipe necessarily, but you can fit more applications on the pipe at that time. And I hear, and I'm sure others can provide some information, some more details, of systems that can generate terabytes of data per second. or terabits per second. Those must be somehow going on the wire, and will the wire be able to handle them? I don't know. I mean,
yeah, I think it's one of the challenges that is being tackled by the your users, the users of NRENs, as they explore these different methods. So the optical infrastructure and its extensions to the edge and collector points within the network are using these new technologies to minimize latency, to improve the performance of the overall system. I was talking just about the optical core, but we have to look at these things in a continuum of end-to-end requirements and how they actually service the user needs. This gets created in a number of hierarchies within the network architecture.
I can just give you a few words about another activity I know that's going on. Terrain is not directly part of this, but there is a consortium called the CEO Forum, which is a consortium of the willing and able, the most advanced networks in the world, who are looking at the way forward for the internet generally. They're looking at open flow services between the major centers in the world. They're also looking at AAI, and my guess is they're going to go for edge again for that. So it's going on.
Thank you. Yeah, one aspect I would like to add, I think there are different ways these protocols break down. One is ultra-high speed, as you mentioned. TCP has strange reactions, then the new UDP has strange reactions. It's like going back to the Big Bang, you know, the universe was strange. And other way the universe is getting strange is mobility. As we all know, mobility is something, we all have our tablets, we're going to a 4G world, and there you have the latency problem. So basically, what is very strange, all of a sudden, talking about your protocols, the DTN, and I hope some of you work on DTN, which is for delay-tolerant networks. And in fact, the whole DTN aspect started with the Windsurf planetary internet. You know, he has a slide in his presentations where you have internet on Mars, Jupiter, and Venus. And of course, you have certain delays because we have not solved the speed of light limitation at this point in time, although maybe some of you are working on subspace communication like is used in Star Trek, very useful and very promising. But in the meantime, the space DTN concept are now applicable to some of our mobile networks. So one creates the old problems of having to store some intermediate information somewhere. So basically, it's back to the old days of store and forward. So indeed, a lot of work has to be done on protocols.
Yeah. I mean, to add to that, also software-defined networking and some of the efforts that have been going on there, bringing out new protocols. But back to my early presentation, the whole idea about innovation within the research community, and is that the original IP protocols came out of the research community. The software-defined networking, OpenFlow, has come out of the research community. And part of the call that the global CIEOs are looking at today is how do we get ourselves back into being the innovators for the next generation, right? We, as the research community, by our demands, are going to force the development of, or we hope will encourage at least, development of new protocols that will help us get to the next advances. And I was looking at statistics last night, and they're saying by 2015 there'll be 1 million video minutes per second broadcast on the internet. How are, what sort of protocols do we need in place in order to ensure that that functions? on a regular basis. That there'll be, in 2015, there'll be 8 zettabytes of digital information created and shared on the internet. Yeah, we need new protocols and we need new technologies if we're going to be moving this type of data around.
I very much agree with you, Jonathan, about the research and education networking, community needing to get back into the innovation seat, but we can't do it. I saw on some slide, these things don't go in a basement anymore. This is a global thing, and we need to do it in partnership with the commercial sector, the providers. So cooperation, not just on a global basis, but across all sectors.
Other questions?
May I ask one more?
Sure.
Are DCNs, are dynamic circuits, are dynamic circuits picking up in the NREN space? DCNs?
Sorry.
DCN, dynamic circuits? This has started a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, but is this something that, am I saying something weird?
Sorry, I'm not hearing it very well.
No, DCN. Dynamic circuits, where basically the circuits are built, initially they were built manually, basically, but you provide dynamic circuits to different point-to-point links, but dynamically. Is anyone familiar with those?
Yeah, I'm not.
All right, never mind.
Not sure. We'll take it. Yeah.
Okay.
So with that, we'll end my session. We now have another speaker who will be called up. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and for the questions.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you.